Is Xi Jinping a dictator? Recently, President Biden visited California to raise funds for his presidential campaign and delivered a speech to donors. In his speech, he mentioned the incident of Chinese drifting balloons. As I mentioned before, the U.S. military believes that Chinese balloons drifted to the U.S. mainland, originally intended to fly to military bases in Hawaii and Guam for reconnaissance, as they have done in the past. However, this time the balloon deviated from its course and flew to the U.S. mainland. President Biden also mentioned this in his speech. He said that we shot down Chinese balloons carrying 2 cars of reconnaissance equipment. The real reason Xi Jinping was very unhappy about this is that he didn't know how this balloon got here, making the dictator extremely embarrassed because he didn't know what had happened. This balloon should not have been here. It had deviated from its flight path. President Biden has mocked and ridiculed Xi Jinping on various occasions, including during very formal occasions, such as delivering the State of the Union address to Congress. This time, he was speaking to donors, which is usually a more casual setting, but it still caused extreme dissatisfaction from the Chinese government. I think it's because Blinken just visited Beijing, making the Chinese government feel that U.S.-China relations are improving, but President Biden immediately mocked Xi Jinping again, making the Chinese government very unhappy. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman expressed strong dissatisfaction and firm opposition, saying Biden's remarks were extremely absurd, irresponsible, seriously violated basic facts, diplomatic etiquette, and China's political dignity, and constituted a serious political provocation. Biden just made a speech, and I don't know how it could be related to diplomatic etiquette. Although the Foreign Ministry spokesman said so, this statement was not reported domestically in China. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also issued a diplomatic note to the U.S. ambassador to China, lodging a strong protest. The Chinese ambassador to the United States also lodged a strong protest with the U.S. government. But none of these were reported domestically in China. Interestingly, the new Prime Minister of New Zealand is about to visit China. When asked about Xi Jinping being a dictator, he said he disagreed with Biden's statement and did not believe Xi Jinping was a dictator. He said China's political system is a matter for the Chinese people themselves, and if the Chinese people are dissatisfied with the political system, they can choose. However, do the Chinese people have the right to choose the political system? No. Do the Chinese people have the right to choose who the national leader is? No. Even if the national leader is elected by the Chinese people, it does not mean that the elected leader is not a dictator. Whether a leader is a dictator is completely different from how they came to power. For example, Hitler was elected by the German people and had the support of the German people. Can you say that Hitler was not a dictator? So, what exactly is a dictator? The term dictator is a foreign word that did not exist in Chinese in the past. It began to be used during the ancient Roman period, originally referring to a person who issued orders, and his orders had to be recorded and strictly enforced. Later, it evolved into referring to the highest leader who held absolute power, with all power concentrated in him, and everyone had to unconditionally obey him. In Chinese, it was translated as dictator. During the Roman Republic period, if the country encountered a crisis and entered a state of emergency, the Senate would appoint a dictator. Power was concentrated in him alone, which improved efficiency and helped solve the crisis. However, when the crisis was resolved and the state of emergency disappeared, the dictator had to return the power and give up the title of dictator. So originally, dictators were temporary. Julius Caesar was also a temporary dictator at the beginning, but when the state of emergency disappeared, he was unwilling to give up absolute power and gave himself the title of lifetime dictator. It can be seen that at that time, a dictator was not a derogatory term, and it could even be said to be a commendable title. Even in the 19th century, some people still called themselves dictators. It was not until the 20th century, when democratic ideas became popular, that dictator became a derogatory term, used to attack enemies. Even if a real dictator no longer called himself a dictator and used different terms, such as head of state, leader of the people, great leader, and so on. Of course, this does not mean that there were no dictators after the 20th century. Hitler is a famous dictator, and Mussolini in Italy at the same time is also a dictator. There are even more dictators on the communist side. Stalin of the Soviet Union was a dictator. The rulers of the Kim dynasty in North Korea, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un, are all dictators. In China, although during the period of the Republic of China, the Communist Party called Chiang Kai-shek a dictator, at that time China was not unified, there were still many warlords who did not listen to Chiang Kai-shek, and there were different political factions within the Kuomintang vying for power. Chiang Kai-shek could not fully control the situation, and even if he wanted to be a dictator, he did not succeed. After the Communist Party took power, Mao Zedong did not become a dictator at first because at that time there were Liu Shaoqi's White Area Party and the party affairs system were still in opposition to him. It was not until the Cultural Revolution that Mao Zedong overthrew Liu Shaoqi, and absolute power was concentrated in Mao Zedong alone, that he became a dictator. Of course, he would not call himself a dictator. He gave himself the title of the Four Greats: Great Leader, Great Teacher, Great Commander, and Great Helmsman, which was actually another term for dictator. After Mao Zedong's death, Huo Guofeng took office. He originally wanted to continue Mao Zedong's practice and turn himself into a dictator, but he had no prestige, and the old generals and soldiers did not listen to him, so he soon stepped down. After that, Deng Xiaoping did not become the nominal top leader, although he was the actual top leader, but there were still conservatives like Chen Yun who were in opposition to him, so Deng Xiaoping did not become a dictator. The top leaders after Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao, did not become dictators either because at that time, collective leadership was emphasized, and the members of the Politburo Standing Committee shared power together, that is, oligarchic rule. However, when Xi Jinping came to power, collective leadership was no longer emphasized, and all the highest powers were gradually concentrated in him alone. Members of the Politburo Standing Committee became his subordinates, all of whom were his cronies, to assist him in doing things, rather than sharing power. The cult of personality was restored, and various slogans were put forward, emphasizing that everyone must listen to him alone, worshipping one idol, which means that only he is the highest leader. 2 maintenances, maintaining Xi Jinping's core status in the party central committee and the whole party. 2 establishments, establishing Xi Jinping's core status in the whole party and the party central committee, establishing Xi Jinping thought as the guiding ideology of the whole party. There are also various titles, saying this and that, but actually, it is still the same as the Four Greats that Mao Zedong gave himself, just using different terms. It's still about leadership, mentorship, command, and helmsmanship, with more elaborate adjectives, making it harder to remember, and I can't remember them all. There are also requests from his followers, like loyalty is not absolute, absolute is not loyal, learning Xi Jinping thought must be in the brain, and the heart, and the soul, and all of this emphasizes that everyone must worship Xi Jinping, listen to Xi Jinping alone, and absolute power is in his hands, and there can be no dissent. Anyone who dares to dissent is called reckless discussion of the central government, and will be arrested. Isn't this a dictator? Why dare to do it yourself but fear others' criticism? Why can you do it, but others can't say it?